On Inauguration Day, President Trump signed his first executive order concerning the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. With that action, the new president has tapped the brakes on the law and fired the first shot across the bow of federal agencies involved with administering Obamacare. There's almost no doubt at this point that the health care law will be repealed and replaced, and this is going to affect a couple of my former colleagues who have been working with Obamacare. So I would like to address them at this time. Obamacare was passed in March 2010 when Democrats had control of all three branches of government. All of the votes from Obamacare came from Democrats. Not one single Republican voted for the law. That in itself should have been a red flag, but I doubt if you can find even 10 people at the organization you work for who even know that. The Democrats had only been in control of the House of Representatives for 2 years, having won control in 2006 when Nancy Pelosi was first installed as Speaker. Before that time, Republicans had controlled Congress for about a dozen years. After Obamacare was passed, people were extremely angry over the new law, and that led to Republicans winning control of the House of Representatives in the 2010 off-year election. Now, that fact is crucial for this reason. Whatever mistakes were made with Obamacare, the new Republican House wasn't going to help fix any problems with the law. Whatever mistakes the Democratic Congress made would absolutely stand. I am a supporter of universal health care, and I had hoped that the health care law would be so successful and benefit so many people that it would become as popular as Social Security and Medicare. But as we all know, that didn't happen. There were huge problems with the law. The most glaring one for us that we all saw in our offices was the Medicaid gap. The new law required all states to expand their Medicaid program with federal help. But here's the kicker. Medicaid isn't just a federal program like Medicare is. It is a joint federal-state program that is funded by both state and federal taxes. So, in requiring states to expand Medicaid, the federal government was dictating to the states how to spend their own tax money raised within their own borders. That could work if the U.S. had a unitary system like Great Britain, where the Parliament has authority over absolutely everything. But that is not the system that exists in the U.S. under the Constitution of 1789. What we have in the U.S. is a constitutionally mandated separation of powers between the national government and state governments. Although there is absolute federal supremacy in some areas, that isn't the case at all in all areas. A lot of state governments did not want to expand their Medicaid programs, and in 2012 the Supreme Court ruled that they couldn't be forced to. And so, many states simply refused the Medicaid expansion, your state, Alabama, being one of them. They locked most of their poor citizens out of Obamacare, leaving them with the same limited options they'd had previously. And we all saw the results of that in our offices on a regular basis, with people crying as we told them they weren't eligible. Then there was the issue of affordability. While people slightly above the federal poverty level got some really good deals, others didn't get such good deals in spite of selecting the best plans available to them. Did you have some people walk away when they saw the cost of their monthly premiums? I certainly did, and it happened more than once. And outside of the work environment, among people that I knew personally, I had people say to me, "This isn't helping me. There's no way I'm paying that kind of premium. I just live paycheck to paycheck," they'd say, "and I've got bills to pay." And so it seemed that people who got the most actual benefit were in a fairly small segment of the population, just slightly above the federal poverty level, while others were getting slammed. This led to a program that has never had majority support and has always been extremely unpopular. Like it or not, Obamacare was always and still is a political thing. It's all about politics. Always has been and always will be for the rest of its lifespan, which may be a pretty short lifespan. It's purely political, regardless of what people in that organization have to say to the contrary. Do you remember all the assertions from those people saying that Governor Robert Bentley would have to expand Medicaid, that he wouldn't have any choice? Even as those organization people were saying this, Bentley stated in his 2014 State of the State address that he would not expand Medicaid. And he never did he? Why is that? because no matter what any UAB study had to say about it, Alabama's Republican voters see Medicaid as a transfer of wealth from the deserving wealthy to the undeserving poor. Consequently, it was never going to happen at the state level. As to the political nature of Obamacare, I'll never forget that idiotic message sent out by Jim Carnes with Alabama Arise, saying that the health care marketplace would continue regardless of the elections. He clearly didn't know what he was talking about, and neither did those organization people. Now Republicans control all branches of the federal government as well, and the dismantling of Obamacare is coming down the road. That leaves you guys in a very precarious position. I'm assuming that you are still working jobs that are paid for by Obamacare. Even if that wasn't the case, you'd still be in a precarious position considering where you work. The business community in Alabama, just like in Texas, which is very near where I am, hates Obamacare with a purple passion. The Business Council of Alabama has been absolutely clear about that in the past, and that's why it was so shocking that the organization wanted us to try to work with small businesses on Obamacare. I couldn't help thinking, do you people even know what state you're in? Because they seem to live in their own little insular world that is very much cut off from the rest of society. But now you've got a tough situation in which sooner or later you've got to find some other place to go. And the business opposition to Obamacare is going to make it tough for you. Because when you sit across from that desk interviewing, you will have to talk about your work with Obamacare, which probably 80% of those people hate. So like Ricky Ricardo on I Love Lucy, you've got a lot of splaining to do. And by the way, many businesses in Alabama will absolutely reject you over political matters, which Obamacare absolutely is. So, as you go forward, what should you do in your upcoming search? I strongly recommend that as you make your initial contacts through the resumes or LinkedIn profiles or however you go about it, that you do not mention the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare by name. You do have to mention your job title, you do have to mention the name of the organization, but I would strongly recommend that you focus on the customer service aspects of your work, because a lot of the work that you've done in enrolling people in Obamacare is very similar to work that is done in insurance companies. I have a sister who is an insurance customer service representative for State Farm, and the work that you do is in some respects very similar. Yours may be more complex because of the dealing with an extremely complicated federal law. It is also similar to work that is done in certain banks and financial institutions. I was once a customer service representative for a loan company, and so the work that you do with the interviewing people to determine eligibility and verifying their identities and entering that data, it's very strongly similar to a lot of customer service work that you find in a lot of other businesses. So I strongly recommend that you focus on the fact that you were, in spite of whatever job title you had, a customer service representative. You also may want to talk about the fact that you did give speeches and presentations to explain the work of the organization and programs through that organization. You can talk a little bit about some of those programs, like the pharmacy and the sliding scale and the various services that were offered, explaining that many of those were in fact, whether people want to admit it or not, targeting the low-income population. So strongly focused on the customer service, strongly focused on the administration, strongly focused on the speaking to people about programs that are offered through the organization, and delay mentioning the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare as long as you can. Now, sooner or later, it may come out during the course of your interviews that what you were actually working with was ACA. And in that case, I strongly recommend you frame it as something that appeared to be a good idea at the time, but that you've seen directly through your work that it didn't quite work as planned. And you can also discuss the fact that it could be a downer that you weren't able to help some people who weren't eligible for that program. You can talk about, in your resumes, you can talk about customer service related to insurance. You might even want to mention Blue Cross, since I think that is the company that I know during the time I was there it was, but you know, that was the company that most people got their insurance programs through. So here's a very important thing. Do not highlight ACA. Do not highlight Obamacare, even though you were very deep in that work. But highlight the customer service, the administration, and the communication aspects. I recommend that you delay mentioning ACA or Obamacare by name until you have to do it. And then once you have done so, you can talk about it in terms of something that you were hoping would work out really well, but now that you had a lot of experience with it, you saw that it didn't work as planned. You know, and that, I promise you, will go a long way to a lot of businesses. Now, if you highlight ACA, if you highlight Obamacare, fact is you're going to limit your opportunities, because in spite of what anyone's going to tell you, there are lots of businesses in Alabama where you folks are who will reject you over perceived political differences. I know what I'm talking about. It's more evident in the small business community, but it exists some even in larger corporations, because some human resources people a lot of times are conservative Republicans as well. So talk about it in terms of something that didn't quite work out as planned, and discuss some of the difficulties with it. Don't mention ACA or Obamacare by name until you have to, and then frame it in the way that I told you. Now, as far as anything that I might be able to do to help you, if you need a letter of recommendation or a personal character reference, you can go ahead and mention that we did work together, and you can have people contact me, and I will write letters of recommendation for you. I've done it in the past. But the thing that I want to emphasize is you have to be really careful in navigating this ACA Obamacare thing. You're going to have to thread the needle. You don't want people to think that you're some kind of left-wing social justice warrior, because that isn't going to go down very well. I can promise you that. I once had a job interview in which I was asked about political candidates that I supported. That was some years ago, but I was asked that back in 1986, and the way it worked out, I was told by one of the interviewers, well, you mentioned all the right people, because the ownership of that company had definite political stances, and it does color everything in a state where you are, like Alabama. Now, if you were to go to Massachusetts or New York or Pennsylvania, maybe Pennsylvania, I don't know, or California or Seattle, Washington, or some places, it wouldn't be the problem that it is for you there. But if you're going to stay in Alabama, you have to be extremely careful about this. So I strongly recommend that you follow the advice that I've just given to you, and if there's any way that I can help you, I will have your back. Just let me know. Thanks, and best of luck to you in your upcoming searches.